Okay, so I guess we can go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody on Facebook, I assume is where everyone is right now. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our second legal barrier discussion for our Justice for Survivors campaign. And I appreciate you all for tuning in today to learn more about Peace at Home's legal program. And for this presentation, our staff attorney, Katelyn Admire, will be talking about ways in which abusers manipulate their victims through the legal process. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, Ashley. Katelyn, sorry.
Sure, of course.
Yesterday. I'm going to spotlight you now so you can do your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Like Jane said, I'm Katelyn Admire. I am one of the staff attorneys at Peace at Home. I'm going to try and share a PowerPoint. I will warn you all that I am not super tech savvy, so bear with me. Okay, Jane, are you able to see?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. All right, so like Jane said, I'm going to talk about litigation abuse, kind of what it is and what we can do to support victims that are experiencing it, how we can prevent it in the future. We'll start by defining it. Litigation abuse is the use of the legal system to continue to perpetrate abuse against a victim. We see this particularly in custody cases. We'll talk a lot more in depth about where we see it and what it means, but custody cases are specifically and particularly susceptible to litigation abuse. It works when an abusive party uses the legal system to continue to control and manipulate their victim by keeping the victim in court as often and as frequently as possible. It is a form of harassment, and I think Ashley talked yesterday, and we'll talk more in the next week and a half, I guess, about power and control dynamics, but it is a form of power and control. A few examples of litigation abuse are excessive or frivolous filings. And something that I'll note that this is going to be true throughout everything that I say, but when I say excessive or frivolous filings, I mean filings that are without merit. I'm not talking about cases that need to be filed, cases that have a good faith basis. These are cases that are brought for the purpose of abuse and for harassment, not cases that are brought in good faith. Another example would be using one case to manipulate another case. A common way that we see this is using a deposition or discovery, which are requests that one party can send to the other that have to be responded to. Using those to gather information or lock down testimony related to a different case. And a lot of times that's a related criminal case. Another form of that would be requesting or necessitating excessive or frivolous litigation expenses. And again, I'll say that these are where it's a meritless situation. This is not brought in good faith. And I have some examples here. We're talking about things like drug screens, where obviously drugs are not really a consideration, and this is just brought to delay and harass the other party. Psychological evaluations or expert witness fees. Witness fees are often thousands and thousands of dollars, and a lot of times could be avoided. As well as appeals and relitigation. What we're talking about with appeals is appealing it to a higher court, again, where it's not done in good faith and not done because they actually believe that the judge or the court made a mistake, but because they want to prolong the litigation, they want to continue to have the victim be involved in litigation longer. Relitigation occurs primarily. What we see at Peace at Home is when the parties move to another county, and the abusive party will try to bring back all of the things that have already been determined by one judge in front of another judge, and it's called jurisdiction or judge shopping. A few more examples are purposefully running up extreme attorney fees. And this happens when abusive parties request multiple hearings or send excessive or irrelevant discovery. Like I said, discovery are the requests that the other party has to cooperate with. This is asking for things like employment records, bank records, information about custody and children involved in the case. Threatening to negatively impact the victim's immigration status or have the victim deported. Gabby and Chad are going to talk more about status abuse later this week or maybe early next week, but convincing the victim to back down from litigation or not be involved in litigation for fear of immigration repercussions is a form of litigation abuse as well. Finally, we see a lot of meritless or dishonest reports to law enforcement or DHS, and this is not always directed toward the victim, but occasionally towards victims and other parties that are helping the victims. So if you testify in front of this court about our custody situation, I'm going to report you to DHS for your kids, and things like that. And again, this is all where it's meritless or dishonest. These are not cases where DHS reports should be made. The reason that this is such a problem and the risks associated with it, or the common results we see from it, are loss of representation. The reality is that attorneys can't continue to represent victims, even though they may want to, when the victim can no longer afford it. And these kind of divorces can cost tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how many hearings there are, how much discovery is done, how many other people are involved. And when a victim can't afford it, then they lose their attorney and they're going at it alone. This can also force victims to make major concessions on important issues. For example, maybe giving up something that they really wanted in terms of custody or support in order to avoid another hearing or more discovery or being deposed again. It can also cause a loss of trust in the legal system, which is particularly manipulative in that these victims are reliant on this same legal system to provide them protection from their abuser. And when they lose their trust in the legal system, that can cause them to no longer access or exercise their other legal rights for fear of what happened in this situation happening in that situation. As I just mentioned, that this is particularly manipulative because victims have to rely on the legal system to protect them, while on the other hand, also being abused by it. It's psychologically and financially exhausting. Like I said, this can cost tens of thousands of dollars for each party. It also results in kids being stuck in the middle. I think I mentioned earlier that cases that involve custody or children are the most susceptible to litigation abuse. They can go on obviously for years as kids, up until kids turn 18 and graduate from high school. It's also hard to prevent. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first is that people do have a right, at least to an extent, to utilize the legal system. And it's hard to prove that the claims are made without merit or in bad faith, without a sustained pattern. And so when even we are able to prove them, it has gone on for such a period of time that we're already years into the process by the time we're able to truly prove it. So talking about what we can do to prevent or stop litigation abuse, there's kind of a long list. One of the primary tools that most states have identified is attorney's fees. Arkansas does not have particular laws on point, but judges are within their discretion to order attorney's fees where litigation abuse has occurred. Something we've seen a move towards in the recent past is including provisions that future litigation or future meritless claims will result in additional attorney's fees to hopefully deter making those claims in the first place. Attorneys can also, or parties can ask the court to limit the number or frequency of filing or limit the situations in which filings can be made. Can also ask the courts to limit the scope of discovery so that abusers are limited in what they can even ask for. Of course, asking that any meritless claims be denied or dismissed. Asking legislatures to define and prohibit litigation abuse. There are 29 states that currently have litigation abuse statutes on the books. The overall consensus in domestic violence organizations seems to be that they're not well defined, and that there's a lot of room for improvement in those areas. Finally, asking local attorneys not to contribute to or perpetuate abusive litigation. As far as Peace at Home services, for victims of domestic violence that are interested in receiving services from Peace at Home, I've attached our contact information. And I've also attached here a list of other resources in Arkansas, and then also the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And those organizations can put you in contact with legal resources as well. And then with that, I will hand it back to Julia.
Or back to Jane.
Back to Jane, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We both messed up each other's names, so. I don't know if you're still spotlighted or spotlit. I don't know how to say it. Okay, there I am.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Katelyn. I don't think we have any questions. I don't see any in the comments on Facebook. We had someone join our meeting, so if they have a question, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. But if nobody else has any questions, thank you all for watching today. And I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about Peace at Home's legal services. I think just by joining us today and learning about ways in which abuse is perpetuated, it really expands support for survivors in our community. And I want to remind everybody that last year alone, Peace at Home spent $37,000 in court fees to support survivors. So please consider donating today if you want to support our legal program and empower survivors. And if you're interested in learning more about our legal program, you can go ahead and go to peaceathome.com or peaceathomeshelter.com/events and register for more events that we have going on this week. Tomorrow, we're going to be hearing from Julia Beasley, our education coordinator, and she's going to be talking about just an overview of our legal program and how you can support us. So if you're interested in joining that, you can go to our website or you can join us on Facebook. We'll be here at the same time tomorrow. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jane.